Hi and Happy New Year. Let's have a look at Solana. The current situation for SOL looks pretty interesting. It's quite promising. And the asset doesn't get a lot of attention right now, right? This is SOL currently at $175, and that's what I mean with attention. Trading volume is comparatively low, which is potentially an opportunity because when trading volume is very high, that's also when the price tends to be high. And then when the hype fades down, when people trade the asset less, that's also when the price tends to decline. So currently we have quite low trading volume, which can potentially be an interesting opportunity. Now, of course, with Solana, you're not going to 100x your money that soon, right? SOL is at market rank number 5. It's got a market cap of 54 billion. So you're taking on comparatively little risk for a competing layer 1 solution, right? When you buy into, for example, Avalanche or Algorand or Phantom, you're potentially taking on more risk, right? Because the market caps are smaller, the price fluctuations, the volatility is higher, but the potential return might also be higher. Solana is a comparatively conservative bet. That being said, if you like the ecosystem, if you think that Solana might outperform all those other blockchains, there is still quite a bit of room. Ethereum is still 9 times larger than Solana. Binance Coin is around 50% larger in terms of market cap. Now let's do what we always do on this channel, and that's technical analysis. Let's look at the charts, but let's not just stick with the US dollar chart, because the issue with US dollar charts is always there's a lot of influence, there's a lot of noise of the general crypto market baked into this price, right? So when, say, Bitcoin goes down or Ethereum goes down, then most of the altcoins, especially the large ones, they are also heavily influenced by this and they also get sold off. So what you really want to look at are the price movements that are specific to a particular asset. Or in traditional finance, you would say you're looking at the idiosyncratic risk, the idiosyncratic price movements. And in order to get that, we have to benchmark this somewhat, right? So a very common way is to simply look at Solana versus Bitcoin. So this is now the relative performance of SOL versus BTC. But we can also become a bit more creative, right? We could, for example, since we are looking here at smart contract platforms, compare Solana to Ethereum, right? So this is now SOL divided by ETH. How is Solana outperforming Ethereum over the long term? And so let's simply go down this list. So we will also look at Solana versus Cardano, SOL divided by ADA. That's this chart over here. Then we will look at Solana versus Phantom. So here we now compare something that's already well established, Solana versus a rising contender. Then we've got SOL to BNB. That's probably most likely the best apples to apples comparison because the market sizes are relatively similar. And last but not least, SOL divided by the FTX token. Because the Solana ecosystem, it is relatively closely tied to the FTX exchange. Some of the decentralized exchanges on Solana, for example, they directly integrate with the order book of FTX. So let's also look at the relative performance here. But first things first, this is Solana in US dollars. And this is why I think the current situation is interesting. We have been going sideways for quite a while, and we have been in this upwards trend channel for quite a bit. And it does look like we might come to a decision rather sooner than later, right? This is the middle of January. By that time, we could potentially jump up higher again. Now, how high, that obviously depends on where the general crypto market is going, but it also depends on relative market caps. So a flippening of Solana to Ethereum, for example, would happen after a 9x. So we would have to go up by quite a bit, right? So there's quite a bit of room. This trend can potentially continue for a little longer. Now, what's interesting when looking at the relative charts to Bitcoin and to Ethereum is that we see some kind of a persistent resistance over here, right? We also have a certain positive trend here, but we couldn't really beat Bitcoin for quite a while, since September of last year, actually. So that's now almost 120 days. So that's not a terrible performance, but it's interesting to simply compare this, right? This looks like a steady positive trend, but once we look at this relative to Bitcoin, we actually had quite a struggle in the year 2000, where temporarily Solana underperformed Bitcoin. And this is quite a move. This is 88% underperformance. And only since the beginning of last year, since the beginning of 2021, we see this outperformance that now for a while has kind of stopped. Now let's look into this in a bit more detail with the relative valuation to Ethereum, because I think this is really what matters. In the end, when you're buying Solana, you're indirectly betting on Ethereum losing in the very long term, right? Ethereum has problems with gas fees, with confirmation times. Solana solves this. And so the bet is that over time, more and more activity will move to the Solana blockchain. Now here's what the TA says. We've got a support over here. That's not bad. We've got our resistance over here. So we're pretty much in the middle of this sideways trading range since the beginning of September last year. And then we also have this nice trend channel over here. And this is what I think is very, very enticing, because we had exactly the same movement before. This is Solana specific movement, right? This is SOL divided by Ethereum. These are not movements that are caused simply by the general crypto market going up. This is Solana outperforming. And so in the past, we had these sideways trading ranges for 130 days, and then we suddenly shot up, right? So who knows, maybe something similar can happen again. Of course, history doesn't repeat itself, but it might rhyme. And so this is how this could potentially play out. Not saying this has to happen in exactly that manner, but such a rise, it would imply an outperformance of maybe 170% or so, maybe even more, right? If we hit the top of that trend channel, we're looking at 300% outperformance, and that's versus Ethereum. And given the current market caps, this might still be in the realm of possibilities, right? Of course, the fundamental development has to underpin this somehow, right? These kind of rallies, they don't happen only because of pretty lines on a chart, right? In the end, these are only imaginary lines. But when we couple this recent development, when we see how the price tended to behave in the past, with the fact that trading volume now is very low, that most attention is now on other altcoins, then maybe we've got a good risk to reward over here. Because the risk is really manageable, right? This sideways trading range, it is pretty obvious, and this is pretty likely a failed trade if we go down, say, by 20 or 25% versus Ethereum from here over the next weeks. But if we don't, and we do get some kind of positive news, the potential reward might be pretty great, right? So the risk versus reward for Solana, simply based on the charts, doesn't look too bad, at least relatively speaking to Ethereum. Now let's also look at SOL versus ADA. So the relative performance to Cardano. We also have a positive trend here overall, right? So Solana does outperform Cardano over the long term, but the upwards pressure isn't that obvious here, right? So that would imply in turn that Cardano might also be relatively cheap to Ethereum. Actually, why don't we look at this? This is Cardano in Ethereum, so a long-term sideways trading range. And depending on where you stand, if we will get really depressed on this again, or if we stay here in the middle, the potential risk here might be 15%, maybe 22%, versus an outperformance of maybe 50%, or in the very bullish case, 150%. So this is now Cardano versus Ethereum. But of course, Cardano also has quite a few fundamental issues, like scaling issues, concurrency issues. It has to solve those problems first before really positive momentum can pick up again. But that's simply for completeness sake. This video is discussing Solana and not Cardano. Now next, we've got one of my favorite blockchains, and that's Phantom. I like Phantom quite a bit because it's up and rising. It is also very cheap to transact with. So using the Phantom ecosystem is very, very nice. The decentralized exchange has low fees, 0.2%. Most other DEXs have 0.25 or 0.3%. The gas fees when using Phantom are also pretty low. So this is now Solana divided by Phantom. How is Solana doing relatively to Phantom? And this is a very different chart. And I find this fascinating because for all these other charts, right, like Bitcoin or Ethereum, Solana in Bitcoin, Solana in Ethereum, we see this clear outperformance. But since Phantom is a very solid project as well, and thus has performed very well, we actually see mainly a sideways trading range versus Phantom, right? So Phantom was able to keep up with the pace of Solana. And so one might argue that Solana now might be again relatively cheap versus Phantom. So that's a potential risk of maybe 18%, a potential outperformance of 160%. Note though, the market cap of Phantom is way, way smaller, right? So it is in practice easier for Phantom to grow over time. And if Phantom can establish itself even more in the future, then this chart might very well go back again to these lows simply because Phantom has more room to grow. It's smaller and can potentially absorb more capital, more growth in relative terms. Now here's the apples to apples comparison, Solana to BNB. Why apples to apples? Because BNB's market cap is pretty close to Solana's market cap, right? 87 billion versus 54 billion. And so here it actually looks like BNB is recently outperforming somewhat. So if you're wondering, I'm pretty bullish on BNB. So maybe this trend might continue. There's a separate video on this channel that discusses BNB in detail that also looks at relative valuations. Feel free to check that out. It's interesting though how quickly the flippening to BNB would happen, right? We would only have to go to similar levels where we have been before, 38% outperformance versus BNB, and we would already be very, very close to BNB's current market cap. So the flippening, it would probably happen somewhere around this area here, somewhere around here. So that's everything that is needed in order for Solana to become the third largest cryptocurrency after Bitcoin and Ethereum. Last but not least, SOL versus FTT. The assets, they are related, but the nature of the cryptocurrencies, it is pretty different, right? Fundamentally. One is an exchange token. The other is a layer 1 solution. And so here we simply see a very similar chart to what we have already seen with Bitcoin and with Ethereum. So there's probably not too much to discuss here, but still I wanted to keep this in this video just for your reference, just for completeness sake. Now, does it make sense to buy Solana right now? Of course, nobody knows, right? Nobody has a crystal ball, but I simply think in relative valuations, I simply think what's the best bet, relatively speaking. And if you're looking for a comparatively stable cryptocurrency, something that's already established, that's got a large ecosystem, but you're still looking for potential growth, then Solana might be a good alternative right now to just putting your money in Ethereum, for example. I like how those long-term charts develop. I like how nobody is currently paying attention. I rather want to buy over here than buy over here when everybody is talking about it and the hype might die down, right? This is not a risk right now. And so, of course, I can't predict the future, especially when it comes around US dollar prices, because cryptocurrencies, they are highly correlated. If Bitcoin crashes, if Ethereum crashes, Solana will have a hard time to make US dollar gains. But if all of crypto stays bullish, then I do think there might be potentially a quite good opportunity here with relatively low risk to relatively high reward. And that's true for most of those comparative charts. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to check out the premium membership as well. We've got daily market updates around the overall altcoin market. There's also a separate course on how to do technical analysis, on how to plot those relative valuation charts, for example. So more information can be found here, thebitcoinstrategy.com. The link is in the video description as well. A like on this video would be appreciated as well. It will help the channel grow. And of course, don't forget to subscribe because I publish videos regularly. Last but not least, we've got a Telegram channel, the Bitcoin Strategy channel. You can simply search for Bitcoin Strategy channel within the Telegram app. See you next time. Bye-bye.